shepherd boy who had taken the 5 smooth stones from the creek bed and killed the giant. That boy who had grown as a musician, playing his lyre for King Saul to soothe him in his times of madness. That young man who had been anointed to be the next king by the prophet Samuel. The one who had stepped forward to lead the armies and had become a commander in his own right. Who had served the king faithfully. Who had befriended the king's son. And now the king, Saul, was dead. David was ascending to the throne. 30 years old, being handed power. And the people came to him at Hebron, and they placed the crown on his head. They poured the oil upon his head, anointing him. For David, it was a great day. It was a beginning. It was the first steps of a journey that would show him being the greatest king of Israel, the one that is still lauded and held up as the example. Jesus was 30 years old too. Except he wasn't having a crown placed on his head. He was going around preaching. He was telling the good news of God's love. He was healing people. And on this day, he made a trip, stopping in at Nazareth, his hometown, where all the people knew him, and he went to the synagogue, and he began to preach. The people heard his message, and they started off saying, "Oh yeah, Jesus, we remember him when he was just a little guy. He's doing pretty well. Hold it, no. He's telling us we need to change? No." It's funny, you very quickly cross that line from being the one who is celebrated as the hometown kid made good to becoming the troublemaker. You know, Jesus went on to explain that no prophet has honor in his own hometown, or even among his family. And I think those of us who do the work of church know what that's like. For many years, my family were members of the church where I was pastor. And I can promise you that never was I my wife's pastor or my son's pastor. I was always either the husband or dad. And, I could perhaps say something theological, but I would usually get an eye roll rather than respect. Jesus found out that proximity does indeed breed contempt. When he went to Nazareth that day, the people discounted him. Yeah, that's that kid. The one whose nose we wiped when he was little, the one whose diapers we changed, the one whose brothers and sister we know, and man, do we know those stories. Hold it. Isn't Joseph, not his dad? You can imagine the stories that took off. And Jesus found that he couldn't do anything there. Couple little miracles. Mark doesn't tell us, but I imagine Jesus healing a small child of chronic halitosis. I imagine perhaps a postnasal drip healed, or maybe a woman delivered of an unsightly mole. None of the great miracles that would make it into Scripture. So Jesus packed his bag and left. He couldn't just leave it alone, though. He had these 12 followers who were watching him, and we're trying to figure out, well, if Jesus can't do anything here, what good is there for us? And Jesus decided that it was time to give them a mission. Pair up, he told them. Count off. 1, 2, 1, 2. Okay. Now I'm sending you out to do the work you've watched me do. Eugene Peterson, in his very loose translation of the scriptures titled The Message, tells the story this way. Jesus called the 12 to him and sent them out in pairs. He gave them authority and power to deal with all the evil opposition. He sent them off with these instructions. Don't think you need a lot of extra equipment for this. You are the equipment. No special appeals for funds. Keep it simple. And no luxury inns. Get a modest place and be content there until you leave. If you're not welcomed, not listened to, quietly withdraw. Don't make a scene. Shrug your shoulders and be on your way. Then they were on the road. They preached with joyful urgency that life can be radically different. Right and left, they sent the demons packing. They brought wellness to the sick, anointing their bodies and healing their spirits. I love the freshness that Peterson brings to this text, the immediacy, and that notion that they shouldn't carry around a lot of gear, that they are indeed the equipment. Now, I've got to tell you, I'm one of those people, I love gear. If I don't have my Swiss Army knife with me, I feel naked. I've always been the trick dad. You know, the one who not only has the first aid kit and an extra pair of socks and a needle and some thread and spare batteries for the flashlight, but also a spare flashlight because you know somebody's going to forget one. And just in case, I've also got 25 feet of paracord thrown into my bag because, well, you never know when you're going to need 25 feet of paracord. Trust me on this one. I know that our boys from Troop 52 have the whole be prepared thing down to a science. And I expect there are a lot of you out there who are also chronically over-prepared. But Jesus sent the disciples out telling them not to take any special equipment. And I think it's because he knows that people who schlep along a bunch of gear very quickly forget who it is that they're supposed to be relying upon. Don't bring a lot of extra equipment. You are the equipment, Jesus tells his followers, reminding them not only that they don't have to bring along tools for the work, but impressing upon them that they are the tools that God is using to overcome evil, to bring wholeness to the world. How liberating it is to hear that. Frightening, too. To think that the best tools that God has to work with happen to be us. It's frightening, but liberating. As we realize that we aren't the ones who are calling the shots, that we aren't the ones who are responsible for everything. We don't have to fix every single problem any more than a hammer has to drive every single nail. Or for that matter, any more than a screwdriver has to drive every single nail. Because that doesn't work so well. But we are the tools that God uses, selecting us for the tasks at hand, helping us to do what needs to be done. Doesn't always work, though. And Jesus told his disciples as much when he told them to shake the dust off their feet when they left the town that didn't welcome them. Or as Peterson says, shrug your shoulders and move on. Jesus knew that his followers couldn't expect to be welcomed everywhere, any more than Jesus was welcomed everywhere. We all have that hometown where we're not given any more credence than just being the snot-nosed kid. The disciples couldn't expect to have everyone listen to them any more than their teacher could. They couldn't expect to heal every sick person any more than their teacher could. They couldn't expect to cast out every demon any more than their boss could. But what they could do was to try. As the church today, we sometimes get hung up on the idea that it's our job to do God's work as if God couldn't do work without us. We're tempted to place ourselves as so central in God's work as to try and make ourselves God without even really thinking about it. We're tempted to use every tool at our disposal to build the church. We do our best to have a whiz-bang Sunday school program so that our children can come and can learn the stories of faith so that they can grow up to become responsible church members one day. We do our best to have a top-notch stewardship program so we can get all of the money that we need to run all these fantastic programs that we know we need to put on if we're going to be the church, the only church that can do God's work. We get into trouble with that mindset. We try and have a life-changing adult education program where we can come together and study scriptures, where we can maintain our growth as people, where we can continue to equip ourselves for ministry. But again, we get into that dangerous place where we think that we're the ones calling the shots. We try and have a world-class youth program where we can keep the kids after confirmation so that they will not wander off and get bored. We try and have a mind-blowing music program. And we do pretty well with that. But again, if we think that we're anything more than tools for God's work, we run into trouble. You see, we forget that it's not about us. We forget that it's about God, and that everything that we do is merely in support of God's work. God isn't there working for us. It's the other way around. You know, it's God's church. It isn't ours. We never exist for our own benefit. For we are indeed the equipment that God uses. That God uses to bring healing to a broken world. We are the equipment that God uses to build justice in our nation. We are the equipment that God uses to show kindness in our community. We are the equipment that God uses to grow love in our families. It's just a little shift in perspective from thinking that we're the ones doing the work to recognizing that we're just the implements that God selects for any particular tasks. It's helpful to remember, too, that it won't always work. That we're going to have those times when we have to shake the dust off our feet, that we're going to have to shrug our shoulders and shake our heads and move on and wait for God to find that next task for us. I'm so often encouraged, though. Encouraged not by those dust-shaking moments, but by those moments when God calls us to do things and things work out. For you know, God has some pretty good wisdom in selecting the hammer for driving the nail and the screwdriver for turning the screw, the pliers for pulling things out. And we aren't all hammers, we aren't all screwdrivers, we aren't all pliers. Each one of us is gifted, talented, created with purpose. And it's when we open ourselves to being the equipment that we find God's grace most manifest in our lives as individuals and in our life together as community. May God then bless us as each one of us finds our place in God's toolbox so that we can be faithful to our calling. And as we respond, may we be blessed, knowing that indeed we are doing God's holy work. Amen.